Have been on kind of a kick lately with blogging and making videos. And anyway, I'm sitting here writing an introductory section, well, what might be an introductory section to this book that I'm working on. Feels really weird to say out loud. And anyway, I'm writing about my own introduction and sort of progression through Wicca. And it's got me thinking, and I'm here on the internet, of course, so I'm like, let's go to the GeoCities archive, which, if you have not done that, those of you who were around in the late 90s and early 2000s, who remember GeoCities, who occupied GeoCities, I encourage you, if you have not, to take a venture through the archives, because it is like time travel. And it's hilarious and nostalgic and wonderful while simultaneously being horrible. So anyway, I've been doing that, and I have been actually putting down my experiences on paper in a way that is concise and direct for people who are not pagan, who aren't insiders, who don't have the lingo, and seeing my teenage introduction to Wicca and paganism in a Word document is a really bizarre experience. And I'm realizing how incredibly media-driven it was. I mean, I wasn't oblivious to that, but the extent to which media was critical to the growth of the neo-pagan movement broadly and Wicca specifically in the 90s and 2000s was just kind of unbelievable. And I'm wondering, for those of you who are recently involved in Wicca or other pagan traditions, or even witchcraft more broadly, are recently involved, or even just in the last, let's say, I don't know, let's say like 5 years-ish, were your first forays as dependent upon media as I think mine were, and many of us who were around in the community in the 90s and early 2000s, were they as important for you? I'm trying to think about, so in the 90s, of course, we had The Craft, and we had Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and we had Charmed, and these three things happened within the span of like a year and a half, 96 and 97. The Witch's Voice comes out in 97. No, earlier than that. I don't know. In the 90s. So we had, and people were starting to get the internet. The internet became a common household thing at that point. I remember we got America Online in 1998 or something like that. And suddenly there was just, the internet, and things were on TV, and then there was a lot of publicity around Wicca specifically. And anyway, I was trying to think about cognates nowadays, because when American Horror Story began airing a few months ago, I saw pagans talking online about how, oh, this was going to be sort of like The Craft, and it was going to draw people in. But the thing about things like American Horror Story is that they're not talking about Wicca specifically. Like, Charmed and Buffy the Vampire Slayer were kind of a big deal because they specifically used the term Wicca and used Wiccan terms. I've seen the first handful of episodes. I missed the last one, I think, of American Horror Story, and it seems like a different beast to me. So I'm wondering if it is having the kind of impact that people predicted. I kind of suspect that it isn't. And then I wonder if, because Wicca has been so prominent in books and television and movies or whatever for the last almost 2 decades, is it as necessary for new people to have been exposed? Not necessary, that's not the word. Is it as likely, maybe, that new people will have come to the movements through those kinds of media outlets? Anyway, so that's been on my mind. So I'm curious, how much impact do you think movies and television and When I say television, I'm including things like popular news coverage, right? Positive or negative. How much has that impacted your, that's not the right question either. How much did that impact your initial interest in pagan and craft stuff? Yeah. So, because I think that was a pretty big deal for a lot of us in the late 90s. So, anyway, I hope you guys are well, and I'll see you the next time I don't feel like actually writing.